are almost 3/4 of the way through our countdown to kickoff series, and it brings us to the Miami Dolphins. If you missed any of the other teams we've previewed already for an entire hour every single day, we're taking a different team and tackling them, then by all means, go download it. And thank you for joining us live if you're doing so, watching the video on twitch.tv/BetQL or YouTube by searching Odyssey Sports. The win total, Corey, 9.5. Slightly juiced to the over, -135. The under at +110. Divisional placement, at least at BetMGM, those numbers are very interesting. 2-1 to win the division, +210 to finish third, and right smack dab in the middle, +175 to finish second. Clearly the books, and again, this is a focus on the Dolphins. I don't want to make it all about the other two teams competing at the top of the AFC East, even as many storylines as there may be in those places, like I said. But clearly the books are looking at this as a very tight three-team race. All three teams also expected to go to the playoffs. The Dolphins, -155 to make the playoffs, +130 to miss. So a tight number there. You're not getting a lot on the number to bet them to miss. They're looked at as a 9-10 win wild card level team.
And that's probably what they're going to be this year. When you talk about the Miami Dolphins, Chris, I think the thing that I like the best, if I'm a Dolphin guy coming into the season, is the fact that you know what the Miami Dolphins are. Everything is relatively the same. Mike McDaniel's the head coach. Tua is the quarterback. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, they play with speed. On the other side of the ball, defense, it starts with Bradley Chubb. You got Jalen Ramsey there. I'm a big fan of Jalen Phillips. You bring Chop Robinson in via the draft. You also got one of my Gamecocks down there in Cam Smith as a cornerback. But there's the same, it's consistency. And in the NFL, consistency is so critical on a year-after-year basis. Now, can they compete with the other teams? Yeah, sure they can. But I think when we talk about the Miami Dolphins, Chris, I think where you started is probably where we're going to end up finishing. They're going to be playing in January. The problem is, are those January games going to be in South Florida, or are they going to be in some place where it's -2 degrees? If it's in South Florida, they have the ultimate advantage. If it's -2, that's been a spot that they have struggled with. But I like the way they build the team. You got Tua, and you know Tua needs quick routes to speedy yard after the catch receivers. They have that in Hill. They have that in Waddle. And they got a home run hitter and a chain in the background. Mostert, yeah, he's in the mix. He'll probably be the lead back, but you know who the home run hitter is. But the consistency of the organization is an asset that the Miami Dolphins have right now. So I like them. I like over 9.5 wins. I'll start there.
It's interesting, you know, like you said, where we started is where we end up when we discuss this team. It is the through line, the thread that runs from the end of last season to this season because of the schedule and the way it's configured. It's not just, I don't think it's tired and cliche to say, well, the Dolphins playing in cold weather, because we just saw it in action. Like we heard in the highlight, the clip that we came back from break from, the loss at Arrowhead in the frigid temperatures, and Miami just looking like they were unable, I don't want to say uninterested, but unable to play in those conditions. And then you line it up against this year. And again, knowing what teams are going to look like or how they're going to be playing in the final 6-7 weeks of the season, that's a hazardous proposition in mid-July. But you can look at it and say, well, I got an idea what the conditions might be like, even if I don't know what the teams may look like. And that's when it gets difficult for Miami, is the last 6 weeks, right? At Green Bay on Thanksgiving. Okay, that's a night game on Thanksgiving in Wisconsin. Probably going to be a little chilly. And then they've got both of their games against the Jets in the final 5 weeks, one at home in week 14, and then they close out in Jersey against the Jets in week 18. I imagine New Jersey in January, early January, will be a little cold. You've also got a trip to Cleveland the week before Christmas week. That probably a little chilly, I'm just guessing. And you also host the Niners and visit Houston. Houston and the Niner games, no weather involved, but let's just talk about the level of competition. You've got one team who went to the Super Bowl last year, and you know what their defense is capable of. And both coaching staffs are very familiar with each other because there's a lot of alignment there. And then you've got Houston, who is the sexiest team this offseason. And a lot of people are looking at to be in contention for maybe not just a playoff spot at that point in the year, but in contention for a division title again. That's entirely possible. So Miami's schedule, it's no slouch down the stretch. Their last 6 weeks, like I said, they are favored just once, and it's a game against the Patriots. And as mentioned, both games against the Jets, which will be huge for positioning in the division. The other side of the coin, Corey, is they start the year favored in
Yes.
each of their first 7 games. And so they've got an opportunity to start strong, right? Jacksonville at home to open. Then you welcome Buffalo on a Thursday night. We know the Bills. A lot of teams have trouble playing in the conditions in Miami in early to mid-September because of the heat. You go to Seattle, you host Tennessee, you go to New England. Those are your first 5 weeks. An early bye in week 6, but there's no reason at all the Dolphins shouldn't walk into the bye week at least 4-1, if not 5-0. So this offense should be set up to continue to grow and find more success. You see that in some of the numbers that are posted at BetMGM for season-long individual player props. It starts with Tyreek Hill lined at the top of the board to lead the NFL in receiving yards at 5-1. His prop, 1,350 yards and a hook, 8.5 touchdowns. He's also 10-1 for most receiving touchdowns, a little farther down the board because the ball does get spread out in the red zone a good bit more in the Dolphins offense than other places. But clearly the books still think that Tyreek Hill can be a dominant force. And I don't see any reason to suspect that he won't be. He's still got it, in my opinion, Corey.
Yeah, no, and that touchdown prop over 8.5. I've seen some over 9.5s out there as well too. So you might be able to,
Mm-hmm.
if you're at BetMGM, you might be able to hit that over there. The yardage number is crazy. The prop is close to 1,400 yards, and then you look at last year, he had close to 1,800 yards receiving. Historic
Yeah.
type territory. We know what Tyreek Hill is. In my opinion, he is the best wide receiver in the NFL, the ultimate game changer. He's a guy who can wreck a game plan. Your defensive coordinator comes into the meeting room the week of the Dolphins, and he says, we got to stop Tyreek Hill. And that's very difficult to do because speed kills, and they know how to use it and utilize it most. Now, in fantasy drafts, early drafts, Chris, he's going off the board as wide receiver 2, behind CeeDee Lamb. Now, I don't think I would take CeeDee Lamb to lead the league in receiving yards again this year. If I want to take a shot on that prop, I probably would look at somebody in the AFC East and Garrett Wilson. A healthy Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson could go crazy this year. But I'm a Hill supporter. I would take over on the touchdowns. The yardage is gaudy, but Hill can put up gaudy numbers. Obviously, health plays a role in this. But if everybody's healthy, which let's assume that, then Hill should be able to cash this prop. This is a guy had over 170 targets last year. He'll get that kind of target share again. And with that speed, I'm all in on Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I
He's
mean,
my
to your
wide
point,
receiver 1, not CeeDee Lamb.
yeah, to your point, 1,800 yards last year, and that was playing 16 rather than 17 games. So
Yeah,
he still had room to
it's
go from
crazy.
there, from
Yeah,
1799 to be exact, and 13 touchdowns, both of which led the league. So, I do question, and I think it's impossible to predict, but I do question, when does he start to show a little bit of age? When does a little bit of tread start to come off the tires? He turned 30 back in March. So it's going to come at some point in the next few years.
yeah,
Wide receivers, especially ones that make their money based on their speed. And look, not to say that that's all Tyreek Hill does, because he can run routes, he can catch the ball, he can make plays in the secondary, as far as making guys miss. But a lot of it is based on speed. And once
yeah.
once you start to lose that speed, that's not coming back. There's no way to remanufacture the speed that may be lost, for lack of a better way to put it. And I'm curious to see when that happens. But those numbers on his season-long player props are very tempting at 13.50 for yards. And whether you find it 8.5, 9.5 on touchdowns, very tempting, 10-1 to lead the league in touchdowns. That's a pretty number. But it's crazy to have, because Jalen Waddle is at 1025, 1,025 yards in a hook. They've got two guys whose season-long receiving yardage props are over 1,000 yards. That's the kind of weapons
It's
they have
crazy.
in this offense.
Yeah, and when you look at Waddle, he is very good too as well. Last year, I believe it was 72 catches. Yeah, 72 catches on just over 100 targets, and he still was able to get over 1,000 yards, 14 yards a catch. That is awesome right there. Right, and that's when you start to get more towards that elite level when you get up to where Hill is at. But Waddle is probably the best secondary piece, WR2, in the NFL. He gets his yardage, he gets his targets, he gets his involvement, and he's a guy you can go out there and go to battle with, whether you want him as a WR2 or 3 on your fantasy team. When you're looking at his props, the targets and the receptions are what you like the most, because he is going to be able to kind of live in that area where he gets a lot of those targets because of all of that attention going towards to Hill. So Waddle is a guy that I can get down with. Last year, he finished as wide receiver 34, not a full complement of snaps, but Jalen Waddle's a guy I can get involved with as well.
Danny Rabinowitz of 560 WQAM in Miami. We appreciate the time. Before I let you run, we got about 45 seconds, Danny. Give me an official over or under the win total of 9.5 for the Dolphins this year.
Guys, I think there is so much pressure on this team that they're going to go over. I really do. And I know those final 6 games are brutal, but there is so much pressure down here for these guys to win. Tua is either going to be on a prove-it year, or he's going to get his new contract. He's got to win a playoff game. Chris Greer, the GM, Mike McDaniel, these guys all have to have a successful season, or that hot seat's going to get really, really hot for a lot of different guys down here. So I do think the Dolphins can squeak over that total, and hopefully this is the year they finally win a playoff game.